Okay, and we're going live. All right, we are in middle of
Rabbi.
an interesting part of the laws of Shabbos, the parts that are dealing with traveling by boat on the Shabbos. Let's bring up the share button. Hold on. Okay. Okay, so there's we're actually did the first two laws. The first two laws were I'll read through them quickly. We did them last week, but one should not get on a ship less than 3 days before the Shabbos, means anytime after Wednesday. From Wednesday on is forbidden because it disrupts your oneg Shabbos, your joy of Shabbos, because of seasick and all that. But if it's for a purpose of a mitzvah, mutter afilu b'erev Shabbos, then it's permitted even if it's on the Friday. Never mind, of course, Thursday or Wednesday. That's about going on seawater where a person can get seasick. However, al naharis, but if you're going on a river, then it's okay, because it doesn't have the same effect. It doesn't disrupt your joy of Shabbos as going on an open sea. I feel about Shabbos even on a Friday it's permitted with vad. The only condition is it shouldn't require you to do any work on the Shabbos. Even if animals are pulling the boat along the river, however that would work, then it's also permitted. Okay, this is where we're holding. We're holding law 3. In the event where it's permitted for a person to go on a boat, on a vessel, on Erev Shabbos itself. Now, here we're going to go into the question of kinyan makom, of how do we establish, because Shabbos has what's called the laws of Tchumen. We're going to learn that in the Torah. It comes around the times of the building of the Mishkan, where Moshe gives out the order not to leave your space. The space, the tchum is not so great. In living in a place like Brooklyn or Manhattan, of course, or even in a metropolitan place like Seattle itself, very rarely does a person come across that issue, which is that you go out of your established space. Anywhere within a livable area, a city, is all one space, and then you have outside of that 2,000 amos, which is, let's just give it a number of a half a kilometer. I'm not sure exactly. An amma is 200 arm lengths, is an arm length of 200. So alpine is 2,000 arm lengths. So it's about let's say 3,000 feet. Yeah, yes, Barbara.
What's the difference between an eruv and what you're describing?
Okay, so there's two. Well, there is a way to extend that space. Means you have, okay, to put it in short, your city is your space. The reason why this comes into the question here is when you travel on a boat, how does that work? So if your city is your space, from that space, or your home is your space, or your areas, your 4 feet are your space. But anywhere that's inhabited is your space when it comes to this rule. Now, from that end of that space, however we decide the boundaries of that space, you have 2,000 arm lengths each in any of the 4 directions: north, east, south, and west. But you can only go 2,001 or 2,000 other. If you that's if you're in a city and you live in Manhattan or Brooklyn, you're never going to get out of that space anyways, unless you're going to have to travel beyond the city lines. If you live where Barbara lives in Bainbridge Island, I'm not sure how the island works because its island itself is kind of a space. But let's say Bonagid, that the island is like a public domain that has a city that's in the island. Once you reach a certain point outside of city boundaries, where it's forest, so you only have the 2,000 arm lengths that you could walk on Shabbos. Now, what a person could do is, when you ask the question about Erev, what a person could do is establish kind of technically that your space is not where you are now, but your space is up to 2,000 feet from where you are now, which is called Erev Tchumim, where basically you push your place of space to a point up to 2,000 arm lengths of where you are now. So it'd be as if your house is 2,000 up to 2,000 arm lengths away from where you're hanging out on Shabbos, which is the city, which basically what allows you to do is, let's say you need to walk up to 4,000 arm lengths from the city. You could move your space to within 2,000 arm lengths of the city. What that prohibits you is, the limitation of that is that it locks up any other space. You can't walk. It depends how much you take. But if you go to the max amount of space, it means up to the 2,000 arm lengths, then you can't even take one step in any other direction outside of the city. So, but if a person, sometimes that's what a person decides to do. And how you establish that is by making a meal, or that's called the laws of tchumim, of extending. What you asked about, how does that differentiate between a regular Eruv? You're thinking about an Eruv to turn a public domain into a private domain. That's a separate type of Eruv. That basically allows you to carry around a city, because now the city is a private domain and no longer a public domain. And those are the laws of Eruv, of carrying. So there's different types of Eruvs that would allow a person to change a certain reality, making, for instance, a city like Seattle that has an Eruv. I think Brooklyn, according to some people, have an Eruv, and Manhattan, I think, has an Eruv, where it allows you to carry within that space. Jerusalem, for sure, has an Eruv. Now, the problem is what happens when you go on a boat, and the boat is in a way that's permissible, right? So that's what he's talking about. So you're allowed to go on the boat on Erev Shabbos. So on Friday, you're going to get on the boat. If you enter the boat on the Friday, now, what were the conditions to go on a boat? One is either you're going on a river, or one is even if you're going into the sea for a mitzvah. And I think we mentioned that there are those who say mitzvah also includes business. Some authorities hold that even permitted on a business trip. So a business trip is more common for a person to want to travel, is for business, not as a cruise for pleasure. So in the event where it's permissible for you to travel on a boat on the Shabbos, you enter the boat on Friday and sit there until it becomes dark. But the boat itself is not going to leave until a later point. So now you've acquired space by the Shabbos entering and you're on the boat. Let's say you go back after, let's say it gets dark, the Shabbos enters. That means night comes, not talking about night enters, cheshecha is darkness. Not because we light Shabbos candles earlier, right? We light before it's dark. So let's say once it gets dark, let's equivalent that to the time pretty much when Shabbos leaves, right? And then now it's 6 o'clock, it's the winter. It's 6 o'clock in the evening, you go home, you eat, you sleep, and the boat is only going to leave later on Shabbos morning. So even if you returned home and went to sleep at home, you're allowed to re-enter the boat on Shabbos because you've acquired the space that's your space by being there until it got dark. The fact that you were there when Shabbos entered makes it your space. And now when you were home sleeping, it's like you were napping in someone else's home, kind of technically. But the only thing that you're not allowed to do is that the boat shouldn't just be moving for you. It has to have other interest of its moving. There's other travelers, Gentiles, what have you, that are not keeping Shabbos. So the boat anyways would leave. And you've acquired a space. So you haven't changed any facts on Shabbos. Now, he says like this. Means it permitted you to go on the boat because you've acquired the option to go on the boat because you were there when it got dark. But you slept at home, so you really kind of made your home your place for Shabbos. Therefore, how does this affect? If the boat is going to leave the boundaries of Shabbos, now it comes to another dry space, another port. Because now you're out of the tchum, you're out of you've already left your space. So what happens if the halacha is like this? What happens if you leave your space? For whatever reason, you leave your space. So you're allowed to go on the boat. But now when you've come to port, you've entered a new space that you can start walking around. And that space, you had no connection to that space when Shabbos came in. It's out of the 2,000 arm lengths. So what do? So it says you only have 4 arm lengths to move. So best obviously is either you walk off the boat and just stand until the Shabbos leaves, or you could remain on the boat. because the boat itself, we're going to see in the commentaries, you could walk around the boat. The boat itself is like a home. But outside your home, which would be outside the boat, you only have 4 arm lengths because you left that space wasn't part of your space on Shabbos, the new port. So therefore, you have to stay within 4 feet. It's not 4 arms is like 6 feet. It's not a lot of space. So it's like you can't just get off the boat and just stand within 6 feet of the shore of the port. So you probably would have to remain on the boat, which is an option, I guess. And above beyond that 4 arm lengths, you're not allowed to go. Over there, and look later, we'll learn in chapter 95 regarding the laws of Erev Tchumim, of limitations of space. Okay. This first of all, this may seem like, when am I going to come across this issue? But it could be more often than not. Hypothetically, if for whatever reason you had to take a train on Shabbos, and the train traveled through non-inhabited areas, and now you're at the new station. You're in theory in a new space, and also actually the boat itself. People who take boats till today would have that issue. Yes, Aaron.
It happens in.
Try to talk in your mic, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. It happens a lot in all these people who speak. Okay, all these people who take cruises. So when the yeshivas let out, they go on these cruises for the winter break. They go on these cruises, and I hear that they don't go out on Shabbos off the boat. Whatever that trip is, it's off the boat on Shabbos. They miss it.
That's the problem, because this is this law, because you haven't acquired that. It means even though the Jewish people in that port city, let's say you come in, let's say you're doing a river cruise, which is permitted, right, even for pleasure, and you're doing the river cruise through France or something, and you come in Mississippi, whatever, and you come to a port that is a Jewish city, and people walking around there on Shabbos. That's because they acquired that space before Shabbos. You have not acquired that space, so therefore you have to remain on the boat or stay within 6 feet or so of the port. It says like this: it will not appear as though you are setting out to travel on Shabbos. What are we talking about here? Oh, so here the case is if you sat in the boat up until darkness and then you went back home. So it's permitted to get back on the boat. Let's say the boat were to leave on Shabbos morning. It will not appear as though you are setting out to travel on Shabbos, but rather as though you are going into your house because you've acquired that space. So because you've acquired that space before when Shabbos came in, so that's like your house for that reason, and therefore you're there already, and therefore you were there before Shabbos. It's not like you went on the boat for Shabbos. He quotes the Magen Avraham for that. Hold on, Aaron. Let's just finish the commentaries on this.
I don't have any question.
Hold on. And he said like this. Okay, what does it mean that because you're in your house, you're not allowed to go into you're not allowed to walk outside on the port city, like Aaron said, if you're taking a trip on the port and you do a port landing on the Shabbos. So it says like this: Shavisa. What does Shavisa means? Shavisa means the word shaves, to rest. Refers to your residence on that Shabbos. Your place of Shavisa is the focal point of your boundaries, Tchumim. So your home is where the boundaries start. Now, if your home is in a city, then your home expands until the boundaries of the city, of the place of inhabitants. So there's law. What defines a city? It doesn't have to be a city. It has to be, for instance, even if, let's say, where someone lives on an island and there's a house and then another house, it doesn't have to be a major, but as long as there's people living there, each house and it's within the space kind of expands that space. So it says, so Shvisa is the boundaries of Tchumim. The city in which you reside is your place of Shvisa, if it's a city. Your Tchumim is described in chapter 95. What does it mean, the laws of space? If you leave your place of Shvisa on Shabbos, which means you left your home by going on the boat now left. So your entire space, which is the city, you left that space. You must remain within 4 amas on your point of exit, which means, and this, by the way, applies also to if you were forced. I mean, if you want to talk a case of force, right? The communities of Gaza were kidnapped on Shabbos, and they were taken. Mr. Abley, that's a no man land. They were taken out of 2,000 feet boundaries, because that's for sure pretty much that the crossing the border. Obviously, that issue didn't come into space because they were they were hostages, and it was a case of pekuach nefesh. But the idea, technically, it says if a Gentile, the law brings down, if a Gentile or someone would move you out of your space and put you into a new space, even if it's by force, once you have the freedom to make choices after that, let's say you can't move past four arm lengths, even in the city that you're in. It says like this. But it is forbidden to walk more than that from the landing. So he says over here, but on the boat, so what about the boat itself? Now the boat actually moved from your port city, right? So maybe even the boat you can't move more than 4 arm lengths. So it says no. But on the boat itself, there's no restrictions. As long as you boarded before Shabbos and stayed there until dark, so you've acquired the space of the actual space, the parameter of the boat itself. And however, if you boarded on Shabbos, then basically the boat is a new space for you because you weren't there before the Shabbos. So you may only walk 4 cubits even on the boat. So it means, let's say there's an emergency. So you run on the boat and you hadn't pre-planned it by being on there before Shabbos. You run on the boat and now the boat gets out of the space of the city. Now you can only just stay kind of in your place, the 4 arm lengths, let's say 6 feet of your space, and that's it. You have to stay in that space until after Shabbos leaves. Yes, Aaron, you wanted to ask something?
Not really, but I will. I don't get when you were mentioning Manhattan and Brooklyn, how we're all one city, even though there's a bridge to get there. There's no other way without that bridge.
Oh, and I'm not talking about, well, that's an excellent question about crossing, because we do cross on Shabbos. One can cross on Shabbos from Brooklyn to I think the law is, I have to check. I think the law is that the bridge itself is the bridge, so to say, no pun intended. It bridges together the two communities, and the fact that it's not a bridge, it's a bridge that's being used on Shabbos. So people are walking, and especially Brooklyn Bridge, people are jogging it the entire time, right? So that itself, I think that itself allows for it to connect, so to say, that it's not like you're leaving the space of the two cities. But I'm quite certain that.
But like before your Rebbe helped build the Brooklyn Bridge, so you had to take a boat.
Okay, but I'm saying now that there is a bridge and the bridge is there from before Shabbos, I'm just trying to see is let's say 2,000 amos is 3,000 feet. What is 3,000 feet? 3,000 feet in miles is that's not that long. It's only 0.5. 3,000 feet is about 0.56 of a mile. The Brooklyn Bridge is more than a mile.
I think so.
So it's a good question how you could cross a bridge. I know definitely people do. I think it could be the fact, like I said, that I have to check.
I know this for a fact.
Yeah, for sure people cross the bridge. I know they do.
There's concerts that if you wait till after Shabbos, you'll never make it. So they stay in Brooklyn, and then a couple hours before Shabbat ends, they walk over the bridge, they go to a shul and pray, and then they got plenty of time to get to the concert.
I'm not going to get into that. That's another question about preparing for the weekday in Shabbos. That's not simple to do. I'm not going to paskin. That's not simple to do. I'm sure they asked their local rabbi, but that's another question.
That wasn't my question. I'm just saying.
No. I know you're talking about the permission, if it's permissible to actually walk the space. Again, I know for sure we walk the space. People walk the space. In Seattle, Barbara's familiar with the Lake Washington bridges are also quite long, longer I think than the Brooklyn Bridge. And people do walk it on the Shabbos if they have to. Obviously, some, but I think it is the idea that the fact that people in the city are crossing it constantly kind of turns it into a single space.
Okay.
But I think I have to check exactly what's to make sure, and I'll post it. Okay, let's continue. Law number 4. Now, so this actually comes to your question about the concerts. You want to go on a boat on Shabbos so you could go to a minyan or another mitzvah, i.e. mitzvah is the point here, not pleasure. So can I go on a boat that's going anyways? Join it, so I should be able to join a minyan. Meaning people that are able to travel on Shabbos, let's say a Gentile, there are those who say you could get on a boat that's moving, obviously in a way that the conditions before have been met, that you've either stayed there until it got dark, or that it hasn't gone out of the tchum, it hasn't gone out of the space. We'll see in a second. Okay, he says, he follows up exactly what I said. Make sure that, let's say you want to go for Shabbos day, to go to the other side of the boat, wherever the boat's going, so you could, like a ferry, so you could daven with the minyan, and there's a Sefer Torah, etc. So you have to get on the boat on Friday, obviously, if you can. On a ferry, you couldn't do that. And to get on the boat, I mean, you don't have access to just get on the boat whenever you like. But in theory, if you can, you have to get on the boat before Shabbos, sit there till it gets dark to acquire the space, and then you could get off the boat and walk to wherever you're going to do that minyan. And then you could go back home after it's dark, and then go back on the boat in the morning. And then go back on the boat on the Shabbos. But if the boat is just going to move just for you, so you could have a minyan, even if it's being moved by a Gentile, then it's not permissible, even if it's for a mitzvah. Okay, so let's just see the commentaries on that. I don't think there are any. No, he doesn't bring down any points on this. So we obviously have to be talking about a case where you acquire the space. All the conditions you said before. I'm just going to see, how does that differentiate between law number? Okay, before in law number 1, it was talking about going on the sea, the question of owning Shabbos. Here we're talking about the idea of tchumim, the question of having the next space, planning out basically. Now again, the question would kind of get around public transport as well, like to get on a subway on Shabbos. If the subway's anyways traveling and you already bought the ticket or whatever, you could do it. Let's say in theory you could avoid all the problems of paying or violating the Shabbos. Can you just get on a train that's traveling anyways? It seemingly has similar questions than the questions of traveling on a boat. Okay, before we go to the next chapter, any questions on this chapter?
Yeah, so forget about the concert now. I know many people love certain, what do you call it? Hazans. And so they'll walk to Manhattan to hear some Hazan that's singing in a certain shul on Saturday morning or afternoon even. So you're not allowed to?
No, you are. I'm not saying you're not. Walking the Brooklyn Bridge is obviously allowed. It's not. What I was
But you were
talking about.
saying if, let's say it's not the Brooklyn, whatever you were saying that you can't make weekend, you can't go on any of the travel, walk, whatever it is on a weekend. Can't make weekday plans on Shabbos.
Okay, that's first of all, that's not the law. We weren't discussing that now. I'm just mentioning it casually
Oh,
outside
okay.
of what we're discussing. Again, that has to be discussed with your local rabbi. Obviously, people. I'm saying there's the prohibition of doing anything on the Shabbos in a way that you're preparing for after Shabbos. It's not covered Shabbos. It's not respectful to Shabbos to do something on Shabbos. That's another question. So if someone wants to go to a concert and ask the rabbi, and the rabbi permitted them by whatever loophole that he did, by going to a shul, like you said, and kind of garbing it in a way that as if you're going to daven in the shul, and then happens to be that you're in the Manhattan now and it's Saturday night. Oh, what did I do? I'm going to go to the concert. So maybe that's the place for permitting it to do. But in general, we're not supposed to do things on Shabbos in preparation for the weekday. Okay. We're now going to learn the laws. Seemingly, these are easy laws, but they're complicated laws, and those are the laws of candle lighting. So for the women of the group, there's a lot more information here that would be applicable to you. However, a lot of this are questions that apply to everyone. Okay, so he says like this: Chayev Adam lahafrish atzmai mimelacha. A person has to cut themselves off, so to say, from work, ulahadlik esaneres, and to light the Shabbos candles. L'chol hapaches chatzi sha koidem tzesak achavim. A half hour minimum before it becomes actually dark. Means our custom is in most places of the world is to light 80 minutes before the Shkia. Now the Shkia is when the sun starts to set. Not in every place is the Shkia, not every place or time of the year is from Shkia, from sunset to darkness, the same amount of time. In certain places, north or south, there's longer times. In Eretz Yisrael, for instance, where I am here now, this is a very short time between Shkia and Tzesak Achavim. In a place like Seattle, it could be over an hour, especially in the summer. So we always light today. The tradition is 18 minutes before sunset. Darkness comes much later. So we're pretty much always within a half hour of when it gets dark. In the Jerusalem, for instance, there's the custom that they light 40 minutes before sunset, or 39 minutes before sunset. Okay, but here he says like this: a person should has to light half hour before dark. The Imamru now he jumps into the complicated law. This is the question of taking Shabbos in early, right? So again, a place like Brooklyn, Manhattan, where there's hundreds and hundreds of minyanim, or Jerusalem, where there's many minyanim going on. So just because one minyan or one congregation is doing something, it doesn't apply to another congregation, right? There's many times a person will go to shul and go to the area, and there'll be a minyan starting early, but that's another minyan, another congregation, another group. That's nothing to do with you. You're accepting Shabbos on time. Again, this question becomes more. It's more of a question in summertime, and where it becomes a challenge is if you don't live in a large city, and you live in a city where there's only one minyan, and that minyan is taking in Shabbos early. How does that work? Does that obligate me to start taking in Shabbos early? Now, for many, many years, those who live in Seattle area, my father would always try to have a minyan to take Shabbos in Bisman, even though all the communities around town, because Shabbos could come in very late in Seattle in the summer, would take in Shabbos early, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and some in Seattle could be close to 9 o'clock or after. But my father would take in Shabbos later, because once the last minyan, it kind of brings Shabbos in to the whole area. There's no minyan, there's nowhere you could kind of say I'm connected to that hasn't taken Shabbos in yet. And where does this law come in right now? This is talking about a town that has, let's say, one synagogue. And in that synagogue, they said Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos. So according to the Kitzur, what defines Shabbos arriving for the community is when the community says the Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos, which is the part of the prayer that's after the Lechadodi. We're going to see that some people say it's actually the Baruch Hu, when we say Baruch Hu Hashem HaMevorach, which is the beginning of the Ma'ariv, that's after Kabbalah's Shabbos. But let's just go with the Mizmor Shir. It's all within minutes, right? So you still have 2 hours till dark. So we just said you have to light the Shabbos candles a half hour before the dark. But here the minyan of the small town, there's no other minyan to go by, took in Shabbos 2 hours before Shabbos. It obligates the minority who's doesn't want to be part of that early minyan, but that's the only minyan in town, and that's your community. Now it obligates the minority. They're not allowed to continue doing what's forbidden on Shabbos, even though they don't want to take in Shabbos early, and it's Shabbos, and it's not even dark yet. Yes, Barbara. You're on mute.
Is it me or?
Oh, sorry, it's Rebecca. Sorry.
Oh, hi. So I don't know if you're gonna still if you're not ready to cover this yet, but let's say in the summer when candle lighting is late, if I go to a family for Shabbos and they want to start Shabbos very early and the husband goes to a really early minyan, and let's say I'm not eating the Suda with them, I'm going somewhere else for the Suda later, like regular time, am I allowed to start Shabbos later, or am I allowed to start Shabbos regular time? Because or do I have to start Shabbos by the time the husband finishes like Mizmor Shir or something like that?
So you're in the house that is the family's taking Shabbos early, but you're going to be eating somewhere else.
Yeah.
You want to take Shabbos there? Okay, that's a very good question. I actually was listening because again, these are hard questions. I was listening to a few things yesterday and preparing the class, going through different options. I don't know if you could see the headings of my different open pages here that I may bring up about here you have right here. This is your question right here. May a wife and children still perform malacha after the father of the home accepted Shabbos early? So here it's even different. The wife and children are going to eat with their husband. The husband goes to shul early. When does the wife and children have to take in Shabbos? And so that's even more, so to say, of a complicated question than your question, where you're not part of that family, you're just staying in someone's home.
Right.
So he says, he goes into the question of the effect of the congregation. Let's see what he answers over here. When a wife and mother lights the Shabbos candles prior to sunset, a candle at the light of time, Shabbos is only considered accepted by her and not by any of her family members. Okay, that's in the other way, that the woman took in Shabbos earlier. However, the congregation. So there it says, he points out over here the majority of the community. Okay. With above background, now that's he goes into the question about the when the community takes in Shabbos early, the woman takes in Shabbos early. Now the question that you have. With above background, how we can now introduce our question. If the husband or father of the home have accepted Shabbos early, such as practicing participating in Kabbalah Shabbos by an early minyan, like you said, he said Mizmor Shir, may his wife and children at home still perform malacha and light candles after prayer of Kabbalah Shabbos, or is that considered that Shabbos is accepted upon them because the husband is the husband of the family, etc., and therefore they must. Okay, so that's the question. Where's the answer? So he says over some posts can rule that once the husband and the father accept Shabbos upon himself through davening, it is considered as accepted also upon his household. I listened to Rabbi Dayan Raskin, who said that it's not so simple. The woman does have a little extra time, but she has to make sure that by the time her husband comes home, that the house is ready. I mean, she can't if she wants. It seems from the ruling of Dayan Raskin, who's the Rav of London, the Chabad Rav of London. He seemed to, from what I understood, what he answered to that question was that it's the husband's in shul, and you want to give yourself a little extra 20 minutes until he comes home. But by the time he comes home, the candle should be lit and the table should be set. It seems like he's leaning on that. But he does mention about your question about a person not keeping Shabbos in front of people who are keeping Shabbos if you're living in their space. And he talks about, for instance, he has the question, if someone is if let's say someone lives in a small community and there's a mikveh in that community, and someone asked him this question, like in Europe, these questions, or in New England, where they have small Jewish communities. So you want to drive, you're not taking in Shabbos early, and you're going to drive to the next township, to the Chabad house, hold on, Aaron, and the Chabad house, and go to the mikveh because you're not keeping Shabbos while everyone's coming out of shul, and they already took in Shabbos. He says you shouldn't do that. Like and I know I was in London. In London, like Seattle, Shabbos comes in very late. And let's say someone has a Shalom Zacher, right? Someone wants to have welcoming the new son that's going to have a bris, a circumcision. So the custom is we have a big, a party, so to say. Shabbos after the meal, people come to welcome the new child to the home, right? It's called the Shalom Zacher. And let's say if you're in London, I actually experienced that. And there's for my son who had a Shalom Zacher, they took Shabbos in early, and the Shalom Zacher was still light outside. So someone who didn't want to take in Shabbos early drives his car up to the house and comes in to wish Mazel Tov. So is that permitted? People do it, but it seems from Dayan Raskin that if like everyone's keeping Shabbos and you're just like driving in the car and showing up, it's kind of not appropriate. It doesn't.
Wait, Rabbi, can I ask you about that? What about what about like where I live? Like, let's say some shuls have in the summer, some shuls have an early minyan, and some shuls start Shabbos regular time. So does that mean that I can't, if I forgot to get something from the supermarket and I'm starting Shabbos regular time, does that mean that I can't go to the supermarket and get
No.
the item that I forgot?
100% you can. I'll tell you more. Than Jerusalem, I go to the mikveh, because they also take Shabbos early while people, and I'm driving there while they're singing Lechadodi, because they can't establish the facts when there's a larger community. But if it's a smaller community, then or if I'm going to someone's home where the home accepted Shabbos, like in the case of the Shalom Zachar, you're going into someone's home while
Oh,
they're in Shabbos and you're not. So that's why I'm saying it could be your question where you're staying by someone and they took in Shabbos. It's different than if you're just in a city and you want to go to a store just because one shul took in Shabbos doesn't mean the rest of the people living in that city who belong to another shul have to do it. But if you want to kind of interact with those people themselves, either like, I mean, the same question would be is, let's say you want to eat with him Shabbos, you're going to go eat with him Friday night and then go home and make Kiddush later for yourself. Is that permitted? And you're going to drive and do, or, have your phone on the table. That's not, that's not appropriate. So, but in
so
your case where you're staying by someone, it could be, I don't know what Diane Roskin would say in that case, if you wanted to do something in your bedroom, like, turn on the light versus,
makeup or something,
versus making a phone call in the kitchen. You know what I mean?
or like using a blow dryer, which is like very noisy and they would hear.
Yeah, I'm saying so that's where it could be kind of a little bit,
But
but I don't, it's not like, it's
what
not
about lighting candles?
forbidden.
But what about like lighting candles? That's doing malacha like
Mm,
in the open.
in the open. Again, there's no, we haven't really, over here, it's kind of talking about what we've learned right now is where we're talking about, like, it seems he's not saying it, but Shulchan Aruch is talking about a shtetl, which is like a town where there's one shul and one community and you're the minority outside, you have nowhere to attach yourself. Even though from what I listened to Diane Roskin's recording, where it seems to say that even the question is like, let's say you live even in a city that's a large city like Seattle, and there's no minyan that is after 7 o'clock, and Shabbos comes at 9 o'clock. There's just no minyan. Every single minyan is taking in early. Does that obligate a person to take in Shabbos early? It's still not so simple, because there's not only one minyan. Kind of, you could try to separate yourself by the fact that there's other minyanim. But yeah, your question about lighting Shabbos candles in a house when they took in Shabbos early, I have to check on that.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask one more thing?
Sure.
So according to what you said earlier, like if I go on a Shabbaton and they're making early Shabbos and I forgot to look up online like if there's other shuls in the area and what time the other shuls are taking in Shabbos, what time their minyanim are. So then I have to start Shabbos. I have to take in Shabbos when the Shabbaton is like starting Shabbos. I can't do it later. I can't do a regular time if they do it early, correct?
Okay, if you're in a city, you can assume there's other minyanim. Again, listen, the fact is, I'm going to give an example for Seattle, because Seattle, actually, this is the way it is. There is no later minyan that I don't think anymore in the summer, which means if you come to Seattle and you want to take in Shabbos later as an individual, seemingly what the halaw just says now, you're a minority, because every single congregation is taking in Shabbos early. There's no congregation you could fall back on. It seems like from when I was listening to Diane Roskin, it's still not so simple if it's in a larger city. And it could be I'm wrong, it could be I'm making a mistake in my understanding. And in the case where you're certain no one else is taking in Shabbos early, you cannot take in Shabbos later. But I don't think that's really 100% practice today. I think it's more like where if you belong to that community. But in the case of the Shabbaton, if let's say you were to go, let's say into the Catskills or some outside area, and you're going to a hotel for Shabbos, everyone, and the minyan is the Shabbaton, like you said. Could you come in, 2 hours later with your car and park and drive in because you're gonna take a Shabbos yourself? That could be a problem.
Right, but I didn't mean that. I meant like
I know. If
lighting
you're talking about, again, if you're in
candles
a
in my
city.
room.
Yeah, okay. I'm saying listen, if just reading the law as is right now, if you're reading the law right now, the law is very simple. If you're in a town and the shul took in Shabbos earlier, you're not allowed to do malacha, not just in public. Shabbos is for you too.
Okay.
Right? That's the but clear. Hold on, Aaron. But clearly, from what I'm learning with Rabbi, we're listening to Rabbi Raskin's questions, which he has, and that question, like it says over here about the woman taking in Shabbos a little later at home if her husband took in earlier. It doesn't seem to fall back on the case where there has to be another minyan. And also, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think where Rabbi Raskin goes into is why they took in Shabbos, if it's a convenience or if it's if it's just to be convenience. There could be other ways of kind of loopholes of getting out of this, the limitations of the way the law is kind of, so to say, raw. Yeah, Aaron.
Okay, in my shul, so they brought this question up to teach us the law because it was summer. My rabbi said, every city has to have a minyan at regular Shabbos time. And if there's only one shul, then it should be at regular Shabbos time. So everyone gets a chance to daven, because it's not fair if someone wants to do the right thing, but he wants to do it at the regular time because he wants to go out for whatever reason. And you have to give him the regular Shabbos, because there might be somebody who wants it. But if you're in Brooklyn, we have so many, so then it doesn't matter. As long as there's one shul having a regular Shabbos where you can walk to. Now, the other thing is, in my town, she's talking about driving. In Brooklyn, I see a lot of Hasidic men. They're bringing out their trash cans, they're driving their cars, and I'm going to shul. And we don't think anything of it because they're not doing anything wrong. Because Shabbos really didn't start. We're just doing it early.
Yeah, because that's different. Again, that's different if the woman took in Shabbos earlier, and let's say in Yerushalayim also, there's 40 minutes. A lot of people are doing a lot of things after those 40 minutes when they lit the Shabbos candles. That's already accepted. But here we're talking about where they actually said Baruch Hu. For a woman to light Shabbos candles is when she lights Shabbos candles. The man accepts Shabbos when they say Mizmor Shir or Baruch Hu. So when the shul says Baruch Hu, that means Shabbos is really settled in. That's the question. But listen, again, this is not a simple topic because it's not just a theory. It's like you said, this is a question that comes into play all the time, and especially in where we live in places where Shabbos comes in very late in the summer months. All right, let's continue. That's again Rebecca's question. You're coming into you're not a member of the community. You're coming from another city. Chol Shabbos miyad. You have to take Shabbos if you're in a small town and the village shul accepts Shabbos early. Miyad kishamru betzibur mizmor shir le'yom Shabbos, when they said the mizmor shir le'yom Shabbos. Ubi'ir sheyesh ba shtei bati knesiyos. But what happens to these two shuls? Ein echad nigrach chaveris. See, that's where the law gets a little complicated. If there's two shuls, then one shul is not obligated to do what the other shul is doing. Each shul could do their own thing. The question is, if there's two shuls all doing it early, does that obligate the people that don't want to take in Shabbos early? Okay, so he says like this. Some say that it's not from Mizmor Shir, it's from Boyi Kala, which is in the Lechadodi. That's what the Mishnah Brura says. Again, others, I think the Alter Rebbe says it's from Baruch Hu. The Rebbe says, yeah, some people say Shemirath. Okay, the law number 2. He says, what can't you do? He says, even a shvus, even a rabbinic prohibition, not just a biblical prohibition, but even a rabbinic prohibition, one would think maybe there's more leniency in a rabbinic where it's not dark yet, I'm just a minority in the village. It's still included, and even for the purpose of a mitzvah, it is forbidden. Okay. Number 3 is next law. Okay. There's a lot to be discussed on this. I'll post Rabbi Raskin's video if one wants to listen to it while they work or drive. It's a great little class on the laws. Mitzvah laharbis b'neres l'chavod Shabbos. It is a mitzvah to have a lot of light, a lot of candles on the Shabbos. Yesh noigim lahadlik asara. There is a custom to have 10 lights lit on Shabbos to correspond, of course, to the 10 commandments. V'yesh madlikim shiva, which is Parsha. There's those who light 7 days of the week. 7 attributes. It shouldn't be less than 2 candles. And that corresponds to Zachar v'Shamar, the 2 words used in the 10 Commandments, one in this week's Parsha Yisroi, and the other in Parshas V'Schanan. One verse says Zachar is a Shabbos, and the other one says Shomer is a Shabbos. So to correspond to Zachar and Shomer, you should have 2 lights. I'm going to get to your question in a second, Rebecca. I think I know what it is. But in a difficult situation, even 1 candle is enough. Yes, Rebecca.
I'm curious to know what you think my question is going to be.
Well, what should a single girl do today? Should she light 1 candle or 2?
So my understanding is that the Chabad minhag is that single women light 1 candle, but in my circles, single women light 2 candles.
All right, there we go. Because of the Zachar v'Shamar, right?
Yeah, I think so. But actually my question is that here, a lot of like married women light, like my mom lights 1 candle for every family member. Is that a minhag, or is that like, because everyone I know does that. So is that like a minhag, or is it almost like halacha?
No, no. The minimum amount is 2. Like if unless it's like, let's just learn what he says here. The minimum amount is 2, unless it's Shas Tzchak 1 is enough. That's part of the mitzvah laharbis b'neiros. We're going to see in a second that once this is actually comes into play many times. I know people that experienced it. If you forget to light, you have to add a candle for each time you forgot, or not forget.
Yeah.
But that's something else. Aaron, we'll get to your question in a second because I want to finish this law before the class is over, and then we'll get to questions. V'yu arukim, and the candle should be long enough. Shiadliku l'chol ha'pachas ad la'achar chila, because the idea is that the light should affect your comfort of your meal. So if the candles go out right away, it's not going to affect the comfort. The idea of the light of Shabbos of Shalom Bayis is to have peace in the home. And also we should be careful to buy quality candles. The Amar Avuni, he quotes the Talmud that says, "Haragul b'ner Shabbos lishtad boy lasses yafa," because the Ravuna says that when one should be careful to have nice candles on Shabbos, and the person who does that is havayan loy banim tamid chachamim. A person, a woman, or the one who's buying the candles gets quality candles. It's a good schus merit to have sons that are Torah scholars. Shnemar, because the connection to Torah and the candle is obviously the verse that says ner mitzvah Torah. The ner mitzvah, it could be the general mitzvah, but here it's talking about the mitzvah of the Shabbos candle. Will give Torah or light of Torah that your children should have. Should be a luminary, a ma'or, a source of light of Torah. The Torah scholar. Aidei ner mitzvah ba'or Torah. When you have the light of candles, the light of the mitzvah of the Shabbos candles, you have the light of Torah. L'chein, and therefore, because we see that now that we've understood that the mitzvah of the candle is not just to be light a candle, but it's also it brings in the spirit of Torah into the family. Therefore, he mentions b'shas hadlaka. Therefore, it's a good idea for a woman while she's lighting her Shabbos candles to that she should pray that she should merit to have sons that light up the house and the family and the area with Torah. B'tov also, this is a very strong custom. The Rebbe would mention this many times, especially to people that needed blessings. The Rebbe would talk about this mitzvah of V'tov shetiten mikoidim eze prutas tzedakah. Make sure that the woman should give charity before she lights. And it's an obligation, not an obligation, but it's usually a custom that the man who sets up the candles should make sure that when he sets up the candles, or if you set up your own candles, to make sure before Shabbos, you don't just last second prepare the tzedakah box with a few coins to light candles before Shabbos. Again, the Rebbe would talk about it all the time when he write letters to women, and the woman would ask all kind of questions for Yeshuas, for salvations, for brachas, for parnasa, for shidduchim. The Rebbe would say, make sure to give tzedakah before you light the Shabbos candles. If a woman is having a difficulty of having children, she's either not happy with her children, meaning to say, God forbid, things aren't going well with her children, whatever that would be, or she doesn't have the blessing yet of having children. It's skula, it's a remedy. It's a segula, it's a good spiritual remedy. That she should say after she lights the candle, the Haftorah, which we say on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is the story, the Haftorah of Hannah, who prays for her son to be Shmuel. She shouldn't just read the words, but she should understand what she's saying means, say it with commentary or with the translation, and not just to say it casually, even if you know what you're saying, but to say it with good intent, with good concentration. Okay, Aaron, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned you had to use good candles. And, okay, for two points. One point is some people use oil, and second point is that there's some prayer around Shabbos, I think it's on Friday, but I can't tell you where. That they talk about what you can and can't light, or what you can't light on Shabbos. And I wanted to see, is there do to explain what we can't use on Shabbos to light.
Okay, so you're talking about the Mem Madlikim. Mem Madlikim is the second chapter of the Tractate of Shabbos. A lot of people have the custom to say that before Baruch Hu, the Mem Madlikin. It's not Chabad custom, but in many Siddurim they have it. In the communities they say the Mem Madlikin, which tells us what the word Mem Madlik means. With what can you light the Shabbos candles? We're going to get into it briefly here because this is Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's a short version of the law, but we are going to tackle in the next law what you shouldn't use, but not all the details as it's brought down in the Mishnah. Yes, Barbara.
So some nights when I get home from work, especially during the winter months, it's already dark and it's past lighting Shabbat candles. So when I am able, should I make that up? And light Shabbat candles, light extra candles at night?
Okay, so there is a discussion I saw about how we deal with such a situation. Well, let's tackle that next week. What we should do in such a situation about making up, because the question is if something is a mistake. There's what's called if you go into Shabbos and carelessness is the reason you didn't light candles is different than initially you're not going to light the candles. So the question is how that applies to making up. Like, you can't, it's not so simple just to reserve the right to add a candle next week for not doing it this week. But the question is, and it's a good question, does if one gets home after Shabbos comes in, about you obviously can't light the Shabbos candles because that's forbidden to light a fire in Shabbos. Could even have a Gentile light the candles for you is discussed. Well, I don't know if we discussed in the Kitzur, but definitely in the commentaries we can mention it. But let's tackle that subject next week, how we deal with that. Okay, so he says about, I'm just going to quickly to finish off. He says about the 10 candles is the 10 commandments, the 7 candles, 7 days of the week. Shomer v'zachar is to remember, is the positive commandment of Shabbos. Shomer is to preserve, which is to make sure not to violate the prohibitions of Shabbos. So to remember those two, the positive and negative commandments of Shabbos, we light 2 candles. Like Rebecca said, it's custom even by a single woman in some circles. What does it mean in time pressing need? So he quotes the Mishnah Brura. If, let's say, one cannot afford, right? If one is poor and cannot afford candles and challah, the order of priority is challah and then candles. So first challah comes, like if you can only buy one. So first you would buy the challahs and then the candles. After he has one candle, he should buy other foods for Shabbos. Means so it goes challah, one candle, and then the rest of the food. Okay, number 7 is, he quotes the source, and after 7, let's see. Here we have 8 is, he quotes the verse Torah Ner Torah Torah Or, and he quotes the verse, the location of the Haftorah for Rosh Hashanah is in the beginning of Samuel. Okay, we're going to get into, in Law 3, we're going to get into what candles should be used, which is Aaron's question. We're going to get into how you make up for lost lighting. We'll try to get some insight into what should one do to in a case where you can't light candles when Shabbos comes in. Those questions we'll all hopefully tackle in next class. Any questions before we close off? Alrighty, listen, again, thank you, Barbara, for bringing to our attention to study the laws of Shabbos. It's a big schus, the laws of Shabbos, very much connected to this week's Torah portion. We learned about Shabbos in this week's 10 Commandments, Zachar Shem Shabbos L'Katre. So in the merit of keeping Shabbos Tu B'Shvat, we should all have the light of Shabbos that brings the light of the Geula. Good Shabbos, everyone, and thank you for joining. Happy Tu B'Shvat.
Thank you.
Bye.